today's topic, which is the accountability fork. And I think it's quite an interesting one because AI has changed the world we live in quite dramatically, and who takes account for what. So, Charles, I'll leave it to you.
Yeah. So thanks everyone for being here. And today we thought we'd talk about accountability, but not as blame, not as being called out, and not as about something that can only happen after something goes wrong. So I want to frame accountability as a choice we make before trust breaks down, before performance drifts, or before risk scales, and before good intentions become poor outcomes. And that is why the image of a fork in the road, in my mind, is such a useful metaphor to use. Accountability is often not one big dramatic moment. It's small moments of choice. A moment where we choose like ownership or blame, action or avoidance, candor or comfort, follow through or good intentions, learning or defensiveness, impact or intention. So shared responsibility or individual isolation. Every day, in small ways, we arrive at these forks, and the culture we create is shaped by the road we repeatedly choose to take. So why does this matter now? Why are we talking about this? Excuse me. Why are we talking about this in the Catalyst Collective? Because the Catalyst Collective is not an AI tools club. That's not our intention. It is a place where we admire technology for its own sake. It's not a place where we admire technology for its own sake. The Catalyst Collective exists because we believe AI alone does not create performance. AI may increase speed, capability, and access to information. It may make work easier to generate, summarize, analyze, or automate. But it does not automatically create trust, judgment, organizational coherence, or aligned execution. In fact, if we're not careful, AI can help us move faster in the wrong direction. It can create more activity without more progress, and more outputs without more clarity. And that is why accountability matters now. So AI changes the accountability environment. When AI enters the workplace, work becomes faster, outputs become easier to produce, decisions become more distributed, risk becomes less visible, and responsibility becomes easier to blur. We start hearing things like, the tool gave me that answer, or the model recommended it, or the data was wrong, or I thought someone else owned the governance piece, and suddenly accountability becomes foggy. That is the risk. Not that AI becomes too powerful on its own, but that the human responsibility becomes too weak around it. So the central message is this: AI can accelerate work, but human accountability determines whether that acceleration creates trust, performance, and progress, or simply scales confusion, risk, and drift. So this is not a technology fork. It is a human judgment fork. At every point where AI touches work, someone still needs to ask, is this right? Is this useful? Is this aligned to the outcome? Who owns the decision? Who understands the risk? What happens if this is wrong? What must we do next? These are accountability questions, and they sit directly at the intersection of AI and HR, artificial intelligence and human ingenuity. Human ingenuity is not just creativity. It is judgment, discernment, responsibility, context, consequence, and trust. I want to take us briefly through 7 accountability forks. We can hold them in 2 ways, as personal behaviors and AI error behaviors. The same human patterns that show up in ordinary work will also show up in AI-enabled work, often faster, at greater scale, and with less visibility. So let's look at ownership versus blame. Blame asks, who caused this? Ownership asks, what is my part? What is within my influence? And what is the next responsible action? In AI-enabled work, mature accountability means we do not disappear behind the tool, the data, the model, the vendor, or the system. Looking at action versus avoidance. Avoidance often looks professional. Silence, vague agreement, delayed escalation, or waiting for someone else to raise the issue. In AI-enabled work, small mistakes can scale quickly, so accountability requires movement, clarifying, pausing, correcting, escalating, or saying, we are not ready to automate this yet. So moving on to Candour versus, there we go, Candour versus comfort. So Candour is respectful honesty, early enough to matter. It is not aggression, humiliation, or being careless with people. AI adoption, Candour may be the difference between responsible use and quiet risk, especially when an output looks impressive, but it is not reliable. How often have you guys come across a situation like that? So follow through versus good intentions is the next one that we're going to be looking at. Good intentions are not accountability. Agreement, enthusiasm, pilots, and policy drafts are not the same as follow through. In enabled work, the real question is what gets closed, governed, measured, integrated into the operating model, and changed in the way work is actually done. Moving on to learning versus defensiveness. Things will go wrong because we are working in complex systems. There will be weak assumptions, poor outputs, and unintended consequences. Defensiveness asks, how do I protect myself? Learning, on the other hand, asks, what does this reveal? And what must change in how we communicate, decide, govern, or execute? So impact versus intention. Most people have good intentions. They want to save time, improve efficiency, help the team, support the client, or use AI productively. But intention does not erase impact and accountability. Accountability means we are willing to repair, adjust, and learn when the outcome is not what we intended. So shared responsibility versus individual isolation is another fork. Accountability is personal, but it is not isolated. People cannot be accountable for decisions if roles, decision rights, standards, and feedback loops are unclear. In AI-enabled organizations, shared responsibility is essential, but it must not become diluted responsibility. Because if everyone is vaguely responsible, no one is meaningfully accountable. So what does all this mean? It means performance is not about AI alone. It is about people, judgment, governance, and execution. AI can accelerate capability and output, but accountability protects trust and outcomes. Every decision is still a human choice, especially when AI is involved. The culture we create is shaped by the forks we choose repeatedly. This is why accountability is not a side conversation. It's central to the work, because every organization is already standing at this fork. Do we use AI to scale activity or improve performance? Do we use AI to bypass difficult human work or to support better human judgment? Do we move faster without clarity, or do we build the conditions for responsible acceleration? Do we hide behind the system, or do we own the outcomes we create through it? That is the real conversation. So as we reflect on these 7 forks, I want to invite us to not make this abstract. This is not a theory conversation, it's a mirror. All of us have our patterns. Some of us over-explain when we should simply own the next step. Some of us delay difficult conversations. Some of us agree too quickly to follow through too slowly. Some of us protect comfort by avoiding candor. Some of us defend our intentions before we have understood our impact. And some of us wait for the system to change before we take the next responsible action with our own influence. And that is human. The purpose here is not guilt. The purpose is awareness, maturity, and movement. So as we move into conversation, I would invite each of us to hold 2 questions in our minds as we discuss these things. Which accountability fork do I most often face? And how does that fork show up in the way I engage with AI, technology decisions, clients, colleagues, or organizational organizational change. So perhaps I need to challenge outputs more carefully. Perhaps I need to raise risk earlier. Perhaps I need to clarify ownership before a project moves. Perhaps I need to stop treating speed as the same thing as progress. Perhaps I need to close the loop more consistently. Perhaps I need to ask, what is the impact before defending the intention? Perhaps I need to help create the condition for others to be accountable, not simply expected to be accountable. So moving on, this brings us back to the broader Catalyst collective purpose. We are here because organizations are trying to close the gap between AI potential and real business performance. That gap will not be closed by tools alone. It will not be closed by hype. It will not be closed by more pilots, dashboards, platforms, or activity. It will be closed by better thinking, clearer decisions, stronger governance, mature communication, practical execution, and human responsibility. This is where the Catalyst Collective doctrine becomes very practical. People deliver, frameworks guide, tools enable, the collective governs. AI does not replace accountability, it increases the need for it. AI can help us do more. Accountability helps us to do what matters. So in conclusion then, so maybe the closing thought is this. Every person reaches the fork in the road. Every team reaches it. Every organization reaches it. And as AI changes how work happens, culture will be shaped by the path people repeatedly choose. Accountability becomes real when we choose ownership over blame, action over avoidance, candor over comfort, follow through over intention. So these are the things that we need to contemplate on and think about as we break into our breakaway rooms to have these conversations that we're planning to have this morning. So
I'd like to interject there. I think we don't have a huge group this morning, so I think let's just all stay in one room. To break away into rooms right now, we're not going to have enough for the rooms. So I think let's just stay in one room and have the discussions. I think that will work well. And so I think Charles has given us a nice backdrop and set the scene for us on what are the key areas that people are experiencing. And really now just to fill in some of the thought process around that is going to be Sonia. Sonia's just going to take us through some critical thinking on the process, the idea of forks. Thanks so much for the introduction and the backdrop, Charles.
Yeah, so we were chatting earlier, Sonia and myself, and we were thinking that maybe we should have a bit of a discussion around 3 questions that we've got basically lined up, and maybe we can just talk through that quickly.
Let's Sonia maybe just introduce her view of it and what she's seeing in business, and then let's go into the questions. Or do we want to kick off with the questions? What are your thoughts, Sonia?
Linda, I was actually quite curious just to hear people's responses.
Sure.
You know, Charles has given us quite a number of examples of some of these forks. You know, and I'm quite curious to just find out how it's showing up for people in their own companies. And then also, because this is where I would, where I'm personally very interested is what is the impact of this on leadership? So I was thinking, let's have a brief conversation and then I'll chirp, Linda.
Yes, we're on a chirp bandwagon today.
Yes.
I've put 3 questions into the meeting chat. So maybe someone can start us with how are these forks showing up in your workplace? Is this something that you're seeing that I've talked about this morning? The second question is, are some showing up more often than others? And how are they showing up for or creating challenges for leaders? So those are maybe some of the themes we can talk to. Does anyone want to pick up on one of those 3 questions or maybe something else? What is resonating with you this morning?
And maybe we missed one. That's also possible. So maybe there are other forks that you are aware of.
Mel?
Morning, everybody. Let me challenge myself and kick off. I never kick off with these answers. So I'm trying to be accountable to myself. Yeah, thank you. That was really, really interesting. I've really enjoyed the content of that. I've been working with it, you know, on my own, in my own way as well. And I always start off with like my own awareness and how this is impacting me. And as a person that has many ideas, I always have lots and lots of ideas. And then, of course, I've now got this amazing partner in crime that gives me more and more ideas to fuel my ideas. And, so I'm using ChatGPT all the time for that. And then when I go back to all these thousands of chats that I've created and ideas I've got, and then I'm looking at myself going, okay, now what are you actually implementing? So I'm actually a very, very good implementer. But I find that because ChatGPT or AI gives me so many more options and, expands my ideas, I'm taking longer to implement, and maybe not holding myself so accountable to implementing because of the fun of ideating, coming up with the images, coming up with the concept of everything, and then failing to implement as fast as what I normally would. So I just thought, that's how it's affecting me on a personal level. And then I also think about it, it's a little bit, like saying, I must exercise. If you're not holding yourself accountable to it, you just don't exercise. So it's the old accountability question.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I think it's so easy for AI to help us to come up with ideas. It seems to have limitless ideas and suggestions of what we can do and how we can do it. And I know a lot of people have got concerns around sycophancy, I think they call it, where AI is just continuing agreeing with you. But you're 100% right. It can also take you down so many rabbit holes that you get excited about exploring these rabbit holes. And then before you know where you are, you're looking back in time and understanding that, oh, I haven't actually achieved half of what I wanted to achieve today because I've been exploring all these different dimensions. So yeah, that resonates with me as well. I think that's a very valid concern. How do we change something like that? Is it something that we need to change, first of all? I think ideation, sometimes it's difficult, especially if you work alone, in that you need to reflect and to bounce things off someone and to get a discussion going in your own mind. So it's probably just to measure it, perhaps. So Devon, you're saying there that it shows up in organizations as decision fatigue. What do you mean by that, Devon?
So I remember, a couple of years ago, I built I worked with the data engineers at this insurance company to create an environment where the human capital team was able to access information that they had about their people in order to make decisions so they can deliver against the strategic objective of being a data-driven HR team, right? And what I saw back then was the time to make a decision increased because we got more information and we took slightly longer to understand the data that we actually had and what it meant and how we could interpret it, right?
Devon? Devon, are you still there?
I think he's frozen.
Oh, shame. That's such a
We'll have to
pity. I
wait for him
was
to
quite
come back.
interested in hearing what he
Diane,
said.
you've got your hand up.
I think personally that the decision fatigue, and this talks directly to Sonia's work, is that people don't understand complexity and how to deal. And I think what Devon has just said, sorry, Devon, you froze, so I sort of jumped in on what you were saying, is that
That's fine.
I think the decision fatigue is because of the complexities of what it is that we're busy working with at the moment. And people actually don't know. And I think, Charles, it's here where we haven't taught people to take ownership. We haven't taught people to, have comfort. Companies are sitting on the versus side of your accountability forks. And I'm almost sure that if we had to teach people or create the environment, as you said, Devon, where people could take accountability, could take ownership, could learn and things like that, you probably would have a different decision outcome. But that's, Sonia, I'm going to ask you around that, because it still takes you to the
can you teach people how to work with complexity to get to a decision faster or easier? Because more data is just making it's overwhelming. You know, like Mel was saying, you get these 5,000 ideas. Which one do you choose? Which one do you action on? What do you do? What do you do with all of that kind of stuff? And where in our human judgment, especially us that are consultants and we work on our own, where in my human judgment does that complexity turn into something that I can actually work with?
So I can respond to that, Diane. You know, I think one of the things that I learned in all of my years with Dave Snowden was that in complexity it really works, or it helps if you treat people as they are, not how you want them to be. And I think it's the same for us. You know, it's other people and us. And I think a big thing that's driving this decision fatigue and a lack of, you know, I think some of it we've got some control over and some of it we don't. And so Mel, I so resonated with what you said, because I sit with Claude and it's like this continuous ideating, but there's no constraint. So when I'm ideating with a human, we've got like an hour and you know, we run it, we can only do so much, but with these tools, it's just never ending, and it creates almost like, I don't know about you guys, but when I go to a restaurant and there's so many options on a menu, I can't choose because there's no constraint. And so I think a big part of, I think the task of leaders to some extent is, how do we create more enabling constraints? And I think we can do that for ourselves as well. You know, so maybe it's something along the lines of, yes, sometimes when you hit that limit, and then you hit the limit like right when you're like in the middle of this great conversation. But I think it's like, what constraints can we put on it for ourselves? Like, you know, I find with Claude, you know, I'm working with it and then, oh, this is a really great idea. And then 3 questions lower down in that same script, I've already forgotten that idea that was up there. So maybe there's a way that we can put more constraints on it for ourselves, because I think we are not naturally necessarily accountable. There needs to be some kind of a scaffolding for it that makes it easier for us. And I think in an organization, it's similar. And Diane, some of your points around complexity, I think a lot of what I do is teaching people how to make more sense of complexity. So how to understand what you can control, what you can't, and what is a signal and what is noise. But there's only so far that you can get with training, because, you know, and I think Devon also mentioned this, and Charles. I think some of this is also around, are we creating the environment where people feel that they've got the permission to take accountability? So it's, are they able? Do they have the mandate? Are they permitted? And then, Charles, what I loved what you were saying in your presentation is that the forks or the paths we continuously take create the culture. And so sometimes people have the permission and they know how to, they've got the skill, but actually the culture and the environment works against it. So it's almost like you need to look at all of these things at the same time. Sorry, I was speaking for a long time now. I hope that was useful.
Perfect.
So I want to just raise something which I think is really interesting, listening to everybody speaking. I think one should take into account our human nature. Our human nature is that we want some kind of manual, and we want to know that we're going in the right direction. So I've thought about this a lot, when I work with it as well, I'm also curious, and that curiosity does get the better of me. You also come up with brilliant ideas. But I have to say, why do I keep on mistrusting the first idea or the second idea or the third idea, or adding on to it? What is wrong that I can't come to something which is, okay, well, this is great, this will work? And I think it's sort of like perfectionist. You know, is this is this right? Is this exactly it? Is this thing not hallucinating, or is it not sycophancy that's driving it? Or is there really some benefit in me going down this rabbit hole? And I think that somehow you want some kind of manual, and you want some kind of human to say to you, yeah, actually, that's a really good idea. We agree to that. You want that, so whenever you're in a meeting or something, you have somebody who ideates, and then you have the sort of like, what would it be? Like the gallery, which then feeds back to you and says, yeah, okay, we like your idea. Or you have the gallery which says, no, we don't like your idea, because that's important to us. That ability to have that gallery to actually confirm which direction to take when we've got all these ideas, and we've got so much curiosity, and we go down this rabbit hole. That gallery is missing. And I think that's a problem, that ability to have that feedback other than ChatGPT, which or Claude, or whichever one you're using, which is going to give you the feedback that you're looking for. That gallery is missing. So I think in a lot of instances, we need to have I don't know how we get a gallery effect, in business, so that we can actually take those and really expand on that and include a group of people to discuss it. So what I've been doing, just to let you know, is that I go onto ChatGPT, then I go onto Claude, then I go onto Grok, and I ask them all the same question. And what has been really a revelation for me is, oh my God, they come at it from such different angles. You will not get anywhere close to one response. So I'm not actually sure whether that makes it better or worse, because I don't get the gallery. Now I'm just more confused than ever. So it's really a difficult thing to get to at a personal level. Now you put that into an organizational level where everybody's got their own ideas and their own thoughts. And I've noticed that these different LLMs have got different ideologies. And I think that's part of it, So Grok has got a very definite ideology. Claude is, I won't say an ideology, but just a very clear mannerism. So they've got their own personalities, and ChatGPT is like a people pleaser. So, you work that out, and then you decide, okay, today I think I'll have this conversation with the people pleaser because it's going to give me the answers I want. Then you doubt yourself. Is it really true what I'm listening to here? Maybe I should go and double check it on Claude. So you waste this enormous amount of time trying to find some kind of something to move forward. So yeah, absolutely, it is a problem.
It's like what Sonia was saying earlier at the restaurant with the menu.
Mm.
So what do you end up doing? You say to the waiter, what do you recommend? And then they give you their opinion, and you make take something off their list that they have recommended because they've seen the food before. So yeah, I think we want that. I wouldn't say necessarily it's reassurance, but you want that second validation of how someone else is thinking and feeling about what you're grappling with. Well, you've got your hand up there, Devon. Over to you.
Cheers, thanks. I really didn't want to speak too much today because clearing my throat more than I'm speaking. But the one point that I wanted to mention was the reason for the Catalyst Collective is that we all start to learn how to interact with artificial intelligence as well, right, Linda? And so we start growing as a community, because it's a community of practice, and how do we practice effectively together? So as Sonia was talking about, as we're all talking about this sort of endless ideation and this chasm of the journey, or the quest, that's the word, the quest that Linda always talks about, a quest of AI. What I've done is I've purposefully spent time personalizing my instructions to ChatGPT as well as Claude, and I use those two more often than I use any other one. And I've given Claude specifically instructions to say, don't go on an endless conversation with me. I want to get to a point where I can execute. So help me get to this point where I can execute. And because then it's my team member, right? It's not this this capability that I just use to generate ideas, or to create social media posts, or to help me build some piece of technology or something of that nature. It's a constraint that I add to say, I want to make a decision on something. Please help me get to this decision. as quickly as possible.
Mm.
So I thought I'd just add that in.
Yeah, it's a good point, that.
Yeah, then you ask yourself the question, rushing to a decision, is that a good thing? Have you not spent enough time exploring it? So it can become quite a challenge. Karen, sorry.
Thank you, Charles. I must say your background was so amazing. I wish I could ponder on that. You've just mentioned so many points that is so absolutely valued, and especially the questions that come into play in the different forks and how you should think about it. When I think practically through the clients that I work with and the maturity in terms of AI and the issues that they grapple with, I can acknowledge and recognize so many of those. But one that I maybe just want to point out, so often in your larger organizations, and I've been working for a corporate for many, many years before I started my own company, was the first thing that the larger corporates want to do is they want to write a policy about it, but it takes them forever to write a policy. And the key decisions that they need to make is, are we going to pay for employees for this resource? And who should receive this access to this resource? And they're not even talking and thinking about the practical culture elements, which some of you have mentioned rightly. So in the end, people are starting to use it because people are excited about the prospects, about most probably, you're right, starting with the ideation, but I think people are overwhelmed. So they realize this can help me move forward faster. So people start using it informally, they pay for it themselves, but the output becomes so fragmented that it doesn't fit within the bigger outcome and the impact that the teams intend. And then you get to the practical things within teams. You've got the multi-generational teams. So your younger generations, they just want to run and they trust whatever the tools give them. They might even play off the different tools against each other, but they don't have the experience to really critically think about the answer and to massage it and amend it to the proper context. Some of the early starters in the Gen X's, very few of the baby boomers adopted. They say, but no, that's stock standard. That is not ideal. It's rubbish. Let's do it in a different way. So there's a lot of tension within teams because people don't know how to use these tools. So in the end, you've got people running in different directions. And I think the culture is so important. There's definitely a learning element. There's a broad skeleton required. And yeah, it should fit in with a bigger picture, because I think it was you, Charles, who said speed is fantastic, but if it is going in the wrong direction, it can be actually more destructive. And people are starting to compete and try and impress key decision makers with whatever ideas that they come up with, but it doesn't fit into the integrated solution of the context. I've also been involved in a client where something that's very emotional, you will know, fitting a lot of people into limited space in the office. Now, who gets what offers, etc. So they said, listen, this is too tough. It's too difficult to sort this out. We'll ask AI to do this for us, and they'll plot the people with the intention that it will be an easy task. But what they found in the end was to say, listen, we can't get away from it. We still have to engage with people. So we can't say, no, this is how it is because the tool said so. So it does not take away, I want to confirm what I've heard from you, it doesn't take away that engagement around the root cause of the issue and the problem and the solution. So the negotiation and the consulting and the speaking to people to get to the ideal answer. So you can't negate that responsibility as well. And we need to teach people that. AI will not teach you that. This is something that retain as a responsibility within teams. And it's unfortunately, you can't get a short script from AI. It's something you need to, as you work and do, you need to find your way. And my thoughts are very much at the moment on how should this culture look and how do you guide organizations to start in the right way. so that they don't have to learn these lessons in a difficult or along the journey. So there are some scripts, and I think many of that is contained in some of the background that you've given, Charles. So it will be lovely to actually go through this later on my own and see, but how practically can we give this guiding sort of advice to organizations? So you want to start and you've got the appetite for this. Let's tackle the culture part to make sure it works, make sure it's good soil where it's landing so that it can grow.
So are you suggesting, Karen, to your clients to handle it in a specific way, or are you saying you're observing that this is happening, but you're not quite sure yourself how to advise them? Or what are you experiencing?
Yeah, Charles, basically, I've got a very fresh new business. So I started working in April. So I've been really just noticing. And this is the type of things that I'm starting. I'm quite a confident user currently of AI, and I've had the privilege of being a regular user and being totally equipped to do so in corporate. But I'm really thinking practically, how can we create the culture and guide? Typically, my typical clients are SMEs. How do we guide them in the decision from the start? How do we adopt this in the most efficient way to have maximum impact?
Okay, Sonia.
Yeah, I just get my hand back down. I love what you were saying there, Karen, and I think this is it's something that I've been working on a lot, and maybe Linda, at some stage we can create a session where we talk a little bit about wayfinding and how it can create a bit of a skeleton or a scaffolding. But I wanted to just throw something into the mix here, especially if we start talking about culture, and to bring it back a little bit to leadership. Because I find these words, like I had this almost like a visceral response when Charles said, or I think it was, I can't even remember who said, we're talking about accountability. Because I don't know about you, but accountability for me has become synonymous with all kinds of blame and there's all of this projection on the word accountability, like, you need to be accountable. Like in corporates, it means something very different to what I think we actually intended to. But I find it really useful to go to the original meanings of these words. So accountable and responsible. Accountable actually means the ability to account. So if you've made a decision, do you have the ability to account? Like, what was your thinking process that brought you to this place? Responsibility means the ability to respond. And Diane, this links back to, our conversation around complexity, because I think many of us have almost lost that ability to respond to what is emerging in the present moment. And I think if we take these two meanings and we think about culture, like if we just allow AI to be used, Karen, so as you spoke about the younger people, so people just accept what it gives them. It's this black box. We allow it to do our office layouts. When it comes to accountability, nobody is able to actually give account for how this decision came about. So I think that's one thing to think about is, how do we preserve human judgment, but then also from an accountability perspective, how do we make sure that we actually understand, I almost want to say, the thought process of these tools? And then from a leadership perspective, I think, because leaders have to give account to boards and they have to give account. So if we don't have the necessary guardrails in place in the organization, it will undermine accountability in its original meaning. And then the same with responsibility. I think these tools can really help us by, I suppose, helping us see weak signals coming up in the environment that we may need to respond to. It can, in a way, enhance responsibility. But again, we need to, because I think responsibility and accountability have become almost like sticks in organizations. We use them to assign blame. We use them, is it like, where does the buck stop and whose fault is it when things go wrong? And so it's almost like we need to find a way to rescue those words from what they've become, and then really think about what do they mean in this new context, and definitely from a leadership perspective, because how do we create cultures and environments where people can give account and where they are able to respond, and all of these things. So sorry, Themba, I saw your hand was up, and I took my chance to say something.
No, it's absolutely fine. I think the point made around being a new company shouldn't be lost. The burden of legacy weighs heavy, and I think, again, I started using or working with Mutusi, who's my LLM, properly only 2 years ago, and it was because I stepped out of corporate to do what I'm doing now. And after 2 years of working with Mutusi quite closely, he, she, it, and I work seamlessly. I do things that used to take me a day in 2 hours. But getting that same kind of traction in corporate is difficult, I guess, for multiple reasons. The biggest reason is that in corporate, you don't have the time to play in the sandpit anymore. And that's the one thing I've enjoyed most about my last 2 years. Like when I see something on LinkedIn that says, use Claude, here's how you use Claude to do this. I can actually take 45 minutes to use Claude to do exactly that same thing and not just scroll past it on a LinkedIn post. So doing that is, we need to hold ourselves accountable to practice and mastery, number one. And then the second thing is that seductive effect that working with a large language model has on making you feel smart as it proves that it's smarter than you. I mean, that's a trick that if consultants ever master it, will make lots of money. But I've instructed it to ask me hard questions for every third question that I ask, so that my synapses have to fire in a 2-hour LLM session. And sometimes I'm like, nope, like, look, I'll answer that question later. And it'll say things like, if you don't know, just tell me. So the practice piece, the mastery piece, and the keeping yourself holding yourself accountable, I think is key. And that's how we keep this thing human if we get to those forks in the roads, because the Sphinx wanted a human answer, not a Sphinxian or a godlike one, for a reason.
Diane?
Thanks. I've just realized that most of us sitting on this call are actually working for ourselves. We probably all have the ability to spend that 45 minutes or go down that rabbit hole or do whatever we want to do to see what's happening out there and what we can offer the market. But for me, I'm coming back to what Devon was saying about how do we treat AI as a team member? And that sort of sitting with me is to say, if my Claude is a team member, and if my Claude was a living team member, how would I treat that team member? And it's almost as if we've started using our tools. Devon, you must give me words here. We've started using our tools as almost a dump ideation. There's a space there that we wouldn't use a team member necessarily for. So it's almost as if we've used it for the things that is not actually adding the real accountability and getting to the point where we're going to, where we can actually go out and do stuff. It's we're all still fantasizing, if that's the right word. Playing. We're all still having a jewel with our AIs. And I think what's very sad, Themba, is that, or what I think is an opportunity, not sad, is that if we could take our experience of the magic that this team member can bring to the table, and Devon's doing that with his AI literacy, is to start making this real, start making this, define that team member, give them characteristics, give them, give that team member a voice, give that team member a space around the table. I think that for me, I'm going to ponder that for me from, what that would look like and how I would approach it if it was a team member versus this tool that I'm sort of having a great time with. It's just what I wanted to say. It's coming to me, and the accountability and the ability to account and to respond. Those are interesting, because these are words that have become they've got a life of their own, as you say, Sonia. We've forgotten what they actually mean, and I think this is probably the point, is that because we've forgotten what things mean, it gets amplified. The forgetfulness gets amplified when you start using tools like this. So that's just my rant.
Yeah, so Diane, what you were saying really started resonating very powerfully with me, because what you found happening is that I think the large labs, like the Claudes and the OpenAIs or whatever, are really competing for us to use their tokens and to use their AI to achieve what we need to do. So what did they do first of all? First of all, they gave this nice shiny little interface that we could go in and chat online in our browser, and we could ask AI all these wonderful questions. And then they gave us an app that we could download and embed in our PC and set it up and discuss things that way. So what Claude's just done now is they've released tags, Claude tags. So you can basically now tag a Claude into a platform like Slack, for example. You're busy having a conversation in a work group, and then you tag Claude into that conversation, and it starts participating in the conversation with you as a colleague. So what you're finding more and more, you're getting pulled in, and they're dragging you. It's almost like the evil emperor who's actually pulling you closer and closer, and you've got this like glaze coming over your being that you can't do anything without AI, so to speak. So it's becoming more and more of a problem, in that we feel that we as human beings might not be able to achieve anything in our day if we're not doing something with AI during the course of that day. And then we kind of like start doubting ourselves. So I think it can become quite paralyzing, and I think we need to be careful as an organization as well that we lose our collective organizational memory and intent to the AI, because like we're giving them our whole business, so to speak. So if you are a SaaS supplier with a piece of software, and you can in chat in Slack tell Claude to go and do something for you on that piece of software, and it goes and does it and executes it, you don't need to use the SaaS provider's interface anymore, because your Claude buddy will just go and do it for you in terms of what you've chatted about in the Slack channel. So it starts becoming very confusing and very uncomfortable if you start thinking about just how far you are getting drawn into that. But at the same time, I wouldn't say it's like a drug or anything like that, but it's kind of like it becomes so easy to just command to control. And there's nothing really that you need to do. Someone, in terms of an agent, will go and execute the idea that you've had, whether it's got any relevance, need, desire, or whatever. It'll just do it because it was told to do it by a human. So it becomes a bit confusing to me. Chamber.
Yeah, Charles, that drug statement, I think it's incredibly seductive and insidious. And I had a crackhead response 2 nights ago when I was three hours into deciphering 300 pages of leadership alignment data. And it started sending me that red, something went wrong message at 1:15 in the morning. And I would try this and I try that, and you go, something went wrong, try again. And I found myself getting humanly upset at this effing thing. And I closed it. I then waited for the Bafana match, and at halftime through Bafana, I went back on and it was working magically again. And the relief I felt when it was working was the same relief I felt when Bafana Bafana scored, which is scary emotionally. On the treating it as a colleague thing, we used to be allocated mentees when I was at Dimension Data, and they were mentees from our graduate placement program, and they were proper bright sparks. Like there was very few things you could teach them other than help them embrace the wisdom you have because you've been here for a lot longer. And I treat my LLM that way. Super smart, super quick, but I still have a little bit of experience on it. And I'll never give it a task that I wouldn't give myself. And sometimes I'd give it stretch tasks that would help grow it and its learning and make it a better tool for me. So these things creep in, and I worry about the day when we're going to start getting charged prices for these things that make it prohibitive for more people than it becomes accessible to. And we saw that when they shut down, what was it, Fable?
Yeah, I was just
saying,
and the saying in the Oval Office, it gets taken away. Then what?
Yeah, but never mind taken away. Only made available to U.S. citizens.
Yes.
Now you have a real life state asserting its authority through AI. So now it becomes a lot more attractive to be American. So if you are sitting in Uttar Pradesh, India, and you're a physics student with A++, and America says, come, we'll give you citizenship so you can use AI, what are you going to do? You're going to leave.
So I want to come back to Sonia's part about words and their meaning being usurped, because, I think that's a very, what do you call it? Prevalent thing in South Africa. So if you look at a word like transformation, in South Africa, it is considered broad-based Black economic empowerment. That's it. That's what it is. But transformation was never intended to be that. Transformation was moving from one state to another. So, the words like accountability and responsibility, those words to a large extent have been usurped. So the question must be, do you try to rehabilitate the words? And in my experience, you can't. Do you try to rehabilitate those words and rescue them, as Sonia was saying, and make them more meaningful, or do you change the way in which you talk about things? And I think what AI has given us is an opportunity to shed those words and replace them with others. Don't ask me what those are now, but I think it's something that we should consider. Because I think, remember right in the beginning, I said we need to find a language with which to discuss AI issues. So to keep on using accountability and responsibility as though they mean what we would intend them to use when everybody else doesn't in a corporate environment, I think it's something we should really consider looking at. What could we replace it with? What could the word accountability be replaced with from a point of view of understanding how we can use it in the AI space, which actually speaks to what we want it to speak to? The frown on your face is absolutely phenomenal, Themba. So there, I've had my chirp for the morning. But that was really, my experience is you can't rehabilitate words that have got a popular meaning, no matter how much you try, and you spend half your time trying to rehabilitate the word as opposed to getting a message across. So Sonia, I'd love to hear your comments on this.
And maybe you can close up for us as well, Sonia, because I know some people had a hard stop. So thank you.
Yeah, and I'm one of those people. I think I actually agree with you, Linda. There's this wonderful word, I think it's in psychology, where they say, or in anthropology, that we need to problematize certain concepts or words. And I think part of what we need to do is problematize some of these words that's been usurped. Something I'm really interested in, because I do think we need a different language. Something else that you would notice is the ability to respond or the ability to give account. Those are they're active. accountability and responsibility have become they're nouns. They're like
Yes,
rigid.
yeah.
And so I think I think the biggest gift we can give ourselves is to create a language that's more process or verb forwards. So it's not, like accountability or responsibility as a thing. It is like, what is the action or the verb that we can replace that with? That would be my 2 cents. But it's very hard, because the moment people hear the word, they already have a meaning assigned to it. So that's why we need to problematize it first.
Yeah, I think you're right. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. This was such a lively discussion. I'm so glad we kept it in the big group. And Charles, thank you so much for your wonderful start to today. And I look forward to next month. And great conversations.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks everybody. It was lovely seeing you.
Thank you, everybody.
Everyone.
That was great.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye.